All right, so if you are here, well, you are all here. If you are here, we hope that you're here because this is a extension of our last session, which was on virtual adaptations of trauma-informed practices. And today we get to do an even deeper dive, a deeper double click, a deeper examination of evidence-based practices, and particularly tiers 2 and tiers 3. Aloha, Gordon, good to see you. And we're really grateful that Beth Cooney is here from the Treatment and Services Adaptation Center for Resiliency, Hope, and Wellness in Schools. That's run out of University of Southern California. And you've met some of Beth's colleagues, Pamela and Vivian and Stephen so far. So we're so grateful for Beth to be with us. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so like many of you, we are a SAMHSA grantee, and we want to just acknowledge that the opinions and views expressed in this session are of Beth's and of ours only. They don't necessarily represent SAMHSA's, although we know that SAMHSA definitely supports evidence-based practices to support young people to access mental health services. So thank you, SAMHSA. Okay. Let's just take a pause moment here. I'm actually going to do this a little differently. Well, I'll do this similarly and differently. So again, my name is Leora, and if we are just joining, I'm the school mental health lead for the Pacific Southwest Mental Health TA Center. We're happy to be here. And by being here, I mean that we want to acknowledge where we come from and where we're going. So we want to acknowledge that this is a program that is mutually collaborated with the Northwest MHTTC, that's on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. And our MHTTC, the Pacific Southwest MHTTC, is led by the Center for Applied Research Solutions, based out of Sacramento and Santa Rosa and LA. And we want to acknowledge that our work gets to be supported by the land that is always has been held and stewarded by the Nisenan people and the 8 Cahuilla bands and the land of the Tongva peoples. And I wanted to ask in the chat box, if you wanted, or if you knew, if you wanted to just put the name of the indigenous land that you do your work on. In the chat box to panelists and attendees, the name of the indigenous lands that you do your work on and with. Many of us, even it's a kind of a different idea to do work on a land versus with a land. I'm just going to invite you, if you know the name of the native or indigenous peoples who stewarded the lands. Thank you, Yvonne. So the Commonwealth, Northern Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinean, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and Rota. Sundance Network on Crow Reservation, Chamorros, and I'm going to move my mouse. Carolinians. I hope, again, Yvonne, you're going to have to at some point be able to unmute in a whole other life and teach us so that we can say the way that the names need to be said. Ohlone land, beautiful. The entire state of Hawaii. Thank you. And so I invite you, if you don't know the name of the land that you live on, come from, occupy, whatever verb feels most resonant with you, to do some research and find out. So today we're talking about virtual adaptations of evidence-based practices. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Look at all this gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous acknowledgement is what I wanted to say. You know, we're talking about evidence-based practices and tier 2 and tier 3 in virtual worlds, and virtual can sometimes create the sense that we're all together, but we're also unrooted. So I just want to take a moment to remind us that we are rooted. We are connecting through computer screens or on the phone or on an app, but we are the connection between that thing and the people that we serve, and the land is who holds us all. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for being teachers in the chat box. Beth, I'm going to invite you to move forward. So speaking of land, again, this is the really lovely map of the MHTTC network. We were founded in 2018 by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration to provide no-cost technical assistance, so that's coaching and training and workshops to support the school mental health and mental health workforce, build our skills and our knowledge and our leaderships to really do good by the people that we serve. And this whole program, whole series is put, again, like I said earlier, in collaboration. We're calling it the West Coast Party with the Northwest MHTTC that serves the peoples of Alaska, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. I saw a lot of you in the chat box. Hello, hello. And we here in the Pacific Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, we serve the school mental health champions of the Pacific Islands. Jennifer just put in the chat box that the land and the oceans connect us all. And what a wonderful way to then say we serve folks in the Pacific Islands, in Hawaii, in California, Arizona, Nevada. And if you're not in those regions and you're with us today, that is all good too. We serve everyone. And if you're interested in getting to know your own regional center, let me know and I will connect you. We've got some time in between this program and our next module. I'll say that in a little bit. So we've got some time to really listen into you about how this work is sitting with you. And we heard from you last time that you wanted the content to be a little bit slower and a little bit more paced because there's a lot going on right now. So Beth is going to support us with providing good, rich content with a little bit more breath. This series is based on, we'll go back one more second. The series is based on 3 fact sheets and 3 foundational webinars from last year. So if you haven't checked them out, please do. Now we can talk about where we are in the work. Okay, so I'm actually going to ask you in the chat box, if you have been with us for more than 5 sessions of this series, that's a lie. Don't do that. I'm going to ask you one more time. If you have been with us for 1 session already in this series, if you can put an asterisk in the chat box. You've been with us for 1 session. So it could have been with Susan, or it could have been with Steve or Pamela or Vivian. 1 session so far. Okay, cool. Great. Okay. Okay, now we're getting numbers. So just you can put an asterisk, just an asterisk. And if you have been to 2 or more sessions, if you can put a pound sign, hashtag, hashtag. Yep, great. Okay, so I'm just looking on the left. So all it means is if before today, if you've been to 2 or more sessions, pound sign. Okay, lovely. If you have been to 4 or more sessions, let's put an exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Hey, okay. Okay, good. All right. Amazing. You were like, I don't know what I've been to. Who am I? What is this world anyway? All right. No matter how many you've been to, we'll welcome you. So you didn't need to go to the ones before to be here now. But I just want to say, I mean, amazing that all of you have been with us for so much of this journey. So we're in our 3rd module. On Monday, many of you were with us with Susan. We just introduced ISF and tiers 2 and 3. So again, interconnected systems framework is the combination of a multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, and student mental health combined to create the interconnected systems framework. So Susan went over the systems lens on Monday. Today, we're actually talking about practice lenses, practice. Virtual adaptations. And then in January, we'll come back together and we're going to talk about interconnected systems and framework and equity. So what does that look like? What is secondary traumatic stress for Black, Indigenous, and people of color educators? So educators who identify as folks who aren't white. What does that look like in the context of their well-being and secondary traumatic stress? And ISF systems and equity and racial violence and trauma in schools. That's our 4th module in January. And then in the end of January, we invite everyone to come back together for a systems and practices town hall. So all the faculty thus far, plus Susan of this series, will all be together for you to answer any questions that are coming up for you or to offer some of your learning. So we hope that you join us. Thank you, Olivia, for putting that link in the chat box. Okay, so last but not least, Some of you, holler out to Project Aware, CNMI, are here as an entire team. Beautiful. And some of you are here with your colleagues, maybe on different devices. And some of you are here solo for now. Great. So we just wanted to invite you that if we're thinking about interconnected systems framework, we're thinking about not only the data, systems work, and the practices, which is today's focus, but that all of those circles lead to our outcomes and have to be rooted in equitable leadership. So today, the question will be, as you're hearing Beth present, what are evidence-based strategies that you can embed in classrooms, in therapy, in treatment, in groups? I know that many of you in the chat box don't work technically in traditional schools. You work in youth service agencies and other ways or organizations. Fine. What are ways that we can be evidence-based, maybe culturally defined, but also that equity is at the center? And that means that I'm going to now transition it. And very last but not least is for our work today. So today's focus is on virtual adaptations of early intervention and treatment. So if you're new to this concept of tiers, it doesn't mean that a student is a tier 2 student. It means the student's external behavior is indicating that there might be needs that need more attunement and more individualized and more attention in a different way than a lot of other folks, right? So there's no pathologizing, it's not stigmatizing, it just means like, oh, we need to fine tune our services to provide because of what some young people are carrying. So again, I'm going to invite us to think about the ways that we create systems that support mental health services for all, and then are attuned into the needs for some, and then even for those who need maybe more intensive services, right? If you want to learn more about tier 2 and tier 3, then you can actually hover your phone, and you'll get this in the PDF, and we'll put this in the chat box. But many of you know that our school mental health national curriculum is available and free to all of you. And there's an entire module on tiers 2 and 3. And coming in January, we're going to be doing virtual adaptations of tier 2 and tier 3 again, so you can get even more information about that. So I just wanted to context if you're new to tiers 2 and tier 3 on the left. Okay, Anna's question is even better because you can't see it. It was just a panelist, but it was, how is this being provided when there are no kids, when kids are not here in school? And that's exactly what we're talking about today. So great segue. All right, Beth, you ready? So this is Beth. Beth is going to come on screen, start video. I'm going to go off video. Beth, if you want to go back and just click start your video and unmute yourself. We're really excited for Beth to be able to join us today all the way from Louisiana. And Beth, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to go off mute. Thank you for being here. Thank you for stewarding our learning.
Sure. So I work, I'm actually a social worker. I work in New Orleans for a program called Project Fleur de Lis, which is a Category 3 center. And for the last 15 years, I've worked providing evidence-based practices in schools, and most recently have really started doing a lot of virtual implementation since last year. And I really oversee a lot of the evidence-based practices in schools and community centers here. So, the tier 2, tier 3 interventions. And I got started after Hurricane Katrina when we experienced that in New Orleans. So that's kind of when I was kind of introduced to all of this. So I just wanted to talk a little bit today about some interventions. And, overall, I'm going to kind of start with a general overview of working with students virtually. It's kind of a new experience for so many of us. And especially when we're talking about evidence-based practices, there's a lot of adaptation involved. And, one of the most common tier 2 and 3 interventions is CBITS. And then for younger students, bounce back. And then SET is also a version that's done by teachers, and they all are skill building. They're skill building groups, and they're really created to, work with students that have been exposed to traumatic experiences and really help them have an ability to handle future stress and learn skills. So we want them to reduce symptoms. We want them to build resilience. And we also want to build in peer and parent support with all of these interventions. So, throughout this, I'm going to talk about different ones, but also really kind of zoom into the components of them because they can be generalized. So Project Fleur de Lis is where I work in New Orleans. We really focus on evidence-based practice as well as restorative practices and suicide prevention. That's kind of the 3 cornerstones of our programming. And then a great resource to all of you that you may be very familiar with is the TSA, the Treatment and Service Adaptation Center, which is loaded with really great resources. So check them out. So I wanted to just start by acknowledging what a year this has been. And really for 2 major reasons, if not more. But the COVID-19 pandemic and really with the disparate harms that are happening, it's different everywhere in each community, and we have specific communities that are more affected. We have to really think about equity. We have to think about access and adaptations and how can we really reach so many students. And, the national reckoning with racism. We know this summer we had a lot of police brutality, and we have students that have really been affected by it. So those 2 things together have created really just these times that are not average times. We know that we need to adjust. And so we're going to talk about some of those adjustments. And we know our interventions have always involved students with multiple stressors, but 2020 really brings on a lot more new challenges. So this is just a representation of kind of what we're doing. We're really trying to build the plane while we fly it. We're really trying to share and collaborate with each other and really try and figure out best practices in virtual delivery. And I know a lot of us around the country are trying to collaborate on many of these ideas, but it's also new and exciting time. So today I have 3 objectives overall, and really to discuss with you the challenges and opportunities associated with virtual delivery of trauma-focused groups. I also want to provide some recommendations for addressing some of the common barriers, things like engaging students, parental involvement, digital divide, and privacy, which has come up so much, and share strategies to implement these groups over virtual platforms. And so we've been kind of working on the guidance for this since March, and have come up with some great ideas and just continue to evolve in the ideas of how to get these concepts across to kids and teens. So I want to just put it out there and see, thinking about CBITS and Bounce Back and really any SET, any trauma-focused group that you may, how many of you are running these groups? And so I want to go ahead and start a poll. Thank you so much, Leora. So I wanted to just kind of, see how many of you are actually doing this right now and get an idea. So I'll give a minute. This is something that a lot of people are having to figure out, just how do we do this and how do I jump in? And there are many barriers that we're going to talk about, but there's also really a lot of opportunities. So I'm excited to be here today to talk about that and just see how many people. So we have about 50%. Just want to give a few more minutes and see before we publish it. Let's see, we got another minute here. Many people are using different platforms. Just to go over while we're waiting, CBITS is really meant for students who are in 6th grade up to high school. And, I kind of talked about how, we're really teaching a lot of skills and working through the trauma. And then Bounce Back is really focused on K through 5th grade. So if you're not familiar with both of those interventions, I'm going to be talking a lot about the components of those, as well as components that are really part of many trauma focused interventions, a lot of CBT, things like that. All right, so we have about 65%. And we can go ahead and publish it whenever you're ready, Leora. Okay, so it looks like we have about 13% of people. We have 31% that are planning on it, which is wonderful. And some of you haven't, and maybe you may change your mind after today. That's my hope. So I will go ahead and move forward. All right, so I just wanted to go ahead and talk about those challenges. So, equity and access has been such a big issue. We know we've had difficulty reaching students. This has affected communities all in different ways. We know that access to devices has been difficult, internet connections, and many districts have really found ways to combat this and try to connect with students. So, we're finding this is getting easier for many of our families, but this is always such a main issue. How do we reach students that don't have access? Also limited tech knowledge. So, for many of us, we're really trying to figure out how do we do these skills? How do we share the screen? How do we pull this up? How do we connect? So there's some limited tech knowledge. It's a new experience for so many clinicians. I know I was kind of thrown into it in March to just figure out. And so the more that you learn, the more you kind of get used to it, and it's a whole different skill. So we also know that many of our students will have a lack of access to the intervention materials. And how do we work around that? How do we think about that? Also, confidentiality and privacy when participating in remote groups. It's really a big issue. So on the other side of the coin, there are opportunities. So caregiver engagement is one, and this has been one of the most great gifts. I feel like this has happened for our groups in just having some kind of involvement in the screening, and we'll talk about that. And even for our younger students, being able to access caregivers, maybe even a little more through just some different ways. So we're going to be talking about that. Also, we're giving students a way to connect with each other while they're feeling so isolated. So, I'm a huge fan of group therapy, and it feels different, but there is something about connecting on a deep level, having gone through something really stressful, and we still can create that for many of our students. And we know that there's actually opportunities for our teens to connect in a different way, maybe a way that we're not as comfortable with. But, sharing in a chat, just being able to type how you feel, maybe for some of our students, that's actually more comfortable. Being able to be at home and feeling that this layer of guard is already kind of peeled off because they're in the comfort of their own home. We're also able to see their home. They're able to share things, maybe even in their room or something around them. So there really is just this wonderful different access to our students that can really be great. So just thinking about leading a group, one of the biggest things that I think in this year and moving on to the next year with all of the challenges we have is to remember about how we can be flexible. So flexibility is important right now for all of us. So we want to acknowledge that it's really a new skill. It's going to feel very different. And different is okay, and that, you can have, when I started screening students this year, I kind of planned them. I'm just going to do this one. And then next I'm going to do this one, kind of plan them together. And what I learned is there's a big learning curve to try and get familiar with the tech and be able to have the students sign on and get used to it. So give yourself that time to space out your sessions, especially at first when you're getting to know it, and then also allow for breaks. it's hard to kind of sit all day. You need those breaks. It's a different feel. I was always so used to being in a school and going to get kids and coming, into a group room. And so this is just a whole different feel. And then just when you do something new, remember, you have to have time to reflect. How's it going? What do I need to shift and change and pivot when things aren't going as well? And your prep is going to take a little more time. You're going to have to figure out, okay, so how do I, adapt this, but, keep it the way it's supposed to be. And then one thing that I just want to stress is that setting the ground rules first is going to be so helpful. So starting the group off with saying, this is how we want it to be. This is what, these are the rules, and trying to start off on the right foot. So we're going to talk about some of those things. So just wanted you to share in the chat. How do you select students for virtual trauma-focused groups? We know this is different, school to school, district to district, even community agencies. This looks so much different. So there might be universal screening right now. We know it's hard to access our students, much harder than it used to be. And so if they are not in school, do we look for parent report? Do we ask teachers? How do we access our students? Those are all acceptable ways, really trying to find out what those ways are. Right, can share with each other. I think there's always different ways to access students, and we have a lot of people calling home and asking how are students doing. We know many of our students have lost loved ones, and that is something that we need to really think about. That can be different. Teacher referrals, as somebody said. All right, so just to kind of do a little bit of an overview, it's really important that an informed consent via telehealth has some specific things. And so I'm just going to kind of go over these, and they're available to you in the slide. So we need to describe what intervention are we doing. We want to describe what telemental health looks like. We also need to really be transparent. What are the limitations of services and confidentiality? And then just talking about electronic communication, what kind of platform we use. I think the other thing that really is an important takeaway is that we need to know the location of the student. And as you go and you get comfortable doing groups and see them, you'll get used to their location and know where they are. But it's really important in the event of a crisis that you know exactly where the student is. So, are you home today? You want to have their emergency contacts. We want to have the address of the home. So you want to have all of that available to you just in case you need it. We also, want to have a plan and a guideline for the emergency room, so they can access that if they need it, just in the event of an emergency. We're not with the student, and so it's something to set up beforehand. And also just an agreement to participate. So virtual screening. And so just going to share some of my experiences. This is going to look different for depending on, where you work and the system for that. So, one thing that's interesting now is that consent forms can be electronic. And so we have a lot of schools that are now able to do this through things like DocuSign, and able to just have parents sign that way. And it can be more successful that way. We've seen a lot of the access increased to getting the forms back. Also calling the caregiver. So, just the idea of, let me establish this connection before I'm doing the screening at home, let them know the process, and then really check in and see, what was their experience with COVID so far. And, say, I'm going to do this screening. It would be great to have a private space. This is what it's about. And then including the caregiver in the screening. And this has been such a gift. I have been able to, especially with some younger students, have the caregiver with them. And I just never had that experience in all the groups that I've been running. And so it's been really nice to have that option. And it's not always the best option, but I think that's when the flexibility comes in. What kind of feeling are you getting with the caregiver? Do I need to say, okay, now it's time to meet with the student if I get a feeling that they're going to say, things that maybe are too much in front of the student? But I've had some really great experiences and felt really connected with caregivers in a way that I've never had before. And then they felt more comfortable with me meeting with their child. So you want to get used to that audio and video, and then really think about a safe word or signal for privacy. So in all of my groups, or even in my individual sessions, I'll make sure we have a signal. And then if somebody walks in the room, they might go like this, or, we all figure that out together. And we make sure that signal is important for privacy. So in the virtual screening, these are just some additional questions to think about. We often use a PTSD measure, and this is kind of different for different groups. We ask about traumatic experiences, but we likely want to ask more about what's happening right now, what's happened in the last year with the pandemic. So how's it been for you? How are you doing? How are you coping with stress? And this is going to vary based on how old they are. But for many students, this is going to be a nice way of asking. And then also, one thing I added was also asking about the students' experiences with hearing about witnessing police brutality and protests over systemic racism. So I gave you some examples of the types of questions that I asked. So since the summer, there have been many protests over police brutality and discussions of racism. Did you attend any protests? Do you want to share your thoughts of what's happening? And just try to open the door to any conversations that they want to have and make it really comfortable. We know that this has affected so many people. And so this is something that we've added. So it's just could be something that you add. So this is a picture of me and a colleague. And I just shared this here to show you what it looks like to the student when you share your screen for the symptoms. So the way that I've done screening is I actually, usually there is a traumatic experiences, history part. So what have you experienced? And then there's symptoms. And so when I have done the history part, I usually just do it one-on-one. And different communities have fillable now. I've heard of people doing it through like a PowerPoint, asking questions and then just marking the answers. So there's just a variety of ways to do screening. But this worked well for me. So I would just ask the questions. And then when we got to the symptom part, I actually would share my screen for the Likert scale and say and explain each one and ask which one. So not at all, once in a while, half the time, and so on and so forth. And that worked really well for me. So that could be an option. So these are just additional screeners if you want to check them out. The first one is a COVID-related screener. It's Stoddard-Kaufman scale. And this really just asks about well-being. Have your routines been affected? Have you felt, things have been harder for you? And so it asks specific things and how much of the time. And then this is another additional COVID screener that is the brief COVID-19 child adolescent PTSD scale. So these are also options to add or use alone. So just wanted to talk about some considerations. There's so much to think about when you think about running groups. So their space, first of all. We want to make sure that they have a designated space if at all possible. We want them to have privacy and confidentiality for the group, but we know that there may be barriers there. And oftentimes earbuds can be really helpful, or headphones. And so that can be a good recommendation if they have them. And like I said, you want to establish where they are. You also want to think about your space. What is your space sharing? When can you use earbuds if you feel like you have people home and it's not confidential? That'd be a really good idea. And then communication. We want to really think about, now that you're not easily accessible and you're working from home, how do your students get in touch with you? Are they able to email you? Can they call you? How do you access them? And then how do you communicate the expectations? So we know if you can communicate them from the very beginning on attendance and space and what they need, it can be really helpful moving forward. So, and then the platform. So, there's so many differences in platforms that I suggest you really try different ones and become familiar with them. Become familiar with sharing slides, sharing videos, and then just plan for tech challenges. I've had so many, and it really just is something that we kind of face. And throughout, I'm doing a group right now, and sometimes people drop off and they drop back in, and we just are okay with it. So think about when we have students that aren't available, how are we going to follow up with them? Are we able to call and talk about what we did? Do we need to plan a makeup session, a makeup one-on-one? Can we email them what they missed? Depending on their age, this is going to vary. And then the other thing that I've really done is been flexible on the time for group, and really kind of made it shorter if needed. Also consider smaller groups, especially if you're running a group by yourself. So just that flexibility around, like, I'm doing this for the first time, I really just want to start small. And I think that it's a good idea. And then when you think about supplies, so I think there's all these great ideas. I can make a supply bag, and if the parents can pick them up, that would be great. But sometimes that's just it's not available. And so, I've really tried to be open, and some of our students, it's hard for them to, print something at home or use their email in the middle of a session. What's been really great is for one of the interventions, Bounce Back, has just started, has been available fillable forms. And so I'm going to share some of those with you, but fillable forms can be really helpful for our students to be able to fill in electronically. And so there's a lot of things that are available that can be helpful. But I also, I've really had not wanted that to limit any students just because they can't, get a handout or something like that. So, think about, what they need, but I wouldn't let it limit you. So this is an example of a slide that I did that has a goal worksheet, and I just attached some emojis to it so I could kind of make it come alive. And so, at the end of the sessions, talking about, this is actually a CBITS session 1 handout, if any of y'all are familiar with it. And so I said, pick the emoji, one of the ones that you want to feel by the end of this group more of or less of. And we kind of shared that way. And so it was really helpful to be able to just have some visuals. So that's just an example, and I'll show you some more as we kind of go along. So thinking about behavior management, this is going to be a little bit different. So, oftentimes you're going to have to think about, how long am I going to wait to start if I don't have all my participants? We really have to set phone rules, and it's really great to do that in the beginning. Thinking about, you cannot record anything in the group. That's something that we take very seriously. We're not using our phone. And just incorporate some ways to keep the energy up. So we want to plan activities, especially for our younger students. How can we end with some fun, right? What are those things that really are going to excite our students to be engaged? And then thinking about the virtual lessons, some ways to enhance that is thinking about, how can we stay true to the model, but really get creative about the content? Can we add videos? Can we add slides? We have some virtual Bitmoji rooms that we can share. And so really just thinking about how, if we do share our slides, we can engage all the students. So I'll kind of show you how I've done that as we go along. So one method that can be helpful is the idea of a virtual circle. And so a virtual circle is just the idea that when you have a prompt, that if you go in alphabetical order, you will know when you're coming next. So, especially our older students, they could get used to this. So as you go, if you're going in alphabetical order, then they'll know that it's coming. You could go in reverse. We'll talk about the types of check-ins that I'm talking about, just kind of creating that natural circle that, everyone gets a chance. You can also have a talking piece. They can choose their own talking piece, and we can incorporate those features that are on the platform. So raise hand. My newest favorite is the little heart. Thinking about, you may have to mute some students if you hear them. And then just being able to, share in the chat box. You may have students who just, that's the way that they communicate, because maybe there's something they're not able to have as much privacy that day, depending on what's going on. So thinking about the idea of incorporating this. I know that, I even have a bird that's present in one of my groups that's just now part of the group. So I've tried to embrace it. And I'm just lucky that it's not a parrot. So for confidentiality purposes, but it's really just getting used to those things that are just a little bit different. So one thing that I've really had fun coming up with incorporating is this idea of a brain break. So many of our students, group might be scheduled for an hour and they're sitting through virtual school. So the idea of that is just heavy, right? And there are some just amazing things out there that can be exciting for our students. So Go Noodles is really a great resource to just add some videos. Zenimation on Disney Plus. If you like mindfulness, it's just this idea of adding some visual. It kind of is engaging, but there's no words. It's just all visual. It's beautiful. And then mindfulness videos can be really helpful. Other ideas might be a stretch break, a 5-minute breakout room, chat break for our older students. And then this idea of scavenger hunt. So, all right, guys, we're all here. Let's everyone go get something out of their room that really makes them happy. And we're going to share that or something like that. So thinking about how can I get some movement, maybe especially if the group falls at a time where they're going straight from class. And then, the check-ins, I think, are even more important. Thinking about that virtual circle. How do we start off our group? I was so used to being able to pick up my students from a classroom and we kind of chat on the way and have that, just those nonverbals and that, walk to our group room or just like that chat right before you start. And we don't have that. So how can we make it to where we're starting off group and kind of having some of that there? So these are just some ideas. What's the weather today? One word to describe your mood. Then your favorites are always nice. Share something fun that you've done this week. Go grab something that makes you happy to share with the group, which I kind of mentioned. So please add any ideas in the chat, because this is always nice to check in and even a checkout. Sometimes I'll say one word to tell me how you're feeling. So sometimes it's hard to gauge. And so the idea of like a check-in or check-out at the end. And I love to end with some gratitude. So I want to go ahead and do a check-in with all of you. So think about what landscape best describes how you're feeling right now. So take a look. And I want you to go ahead and put the number in the chat. Think about what's your mood, how you're feeling. And I'd love to see what number. I'm just going to give you a minute. Maybe take some deep breaths. Wonderful. And so, asking a question like this can really help you gauge how are your students doing. They're all different landscapes, and I'm seeing such a variety of numbers. And whatever it is, whatever they're feeling, obviously is okay. It's just a different way to kind of check in. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, so I wanted to go ahead and get into the different components. And I'm just going to kind of go over a few just to kind of get a feel for kind of what we're talking about here. So common reactions. We know this is a big part of trauma groups. We talk about normalizing those stress responses. So ways to make this kind of come alive in these virtual settings. So share a handout through email. On the right here, you can see that's kind of what a fillable form looks like from Bounce Back. Thinking about how our students can check those off. You could even show those and have them write them down. They could share what one common reaction. For our older students, we use something, especially in CBITS, things like towards the bottom. So having trouble concentrating at school or at home. So when I shared this with my students, I would say, would anybody like to share if they felt like that before? You can write down the reactions you have as we go, because I would love for you to share that with your caregiver when we're done. So, we can try to share that common reaction handout, but once again, we really just don't want our students to feel like they can't participate if they don't have that. We really want them to be engaged. So I went ahead and made some slides for each one, and I would go around and ask students their reactions and just tried to have some pictures adapting what that looked like, just to have it come alive a little bit more. And it really went wonderful to be able to hear from them, and they were able to really see each one. And for my group, they were sixth grade, so they read the bold, and then I would read the other part and then ask them questions. But this could be done in a variety of ways. And then thinking about relaxation. This is one of my favorite things to teach, but just this is really a way to get creative. So these pictures here are examples. Bounce Back really uses this kind of script. I know it's kind of from in many interventions as well as TFCBT, but squeeze the lemon. So just showing a visual, stretch up like a cat. So feel free to do that right now if that feels good. And then just thinking about, how do we teach belly breathing when you can only see me from here? And so we might actually need to show a video. This is just a graphic I found, but that idea of let's all take a deep breath, blow our bellies up just like a balloon, and deflate it. We also might say, hey, does anybody go grab a stuffed animal you have for our younger students, and let's put it on your belly, and it can go up and down. And that can be a really great way to deep breathe. And I just put a website on here that's really great and resourceful, coping skills for kids.com. So that might be a really nice resource for some of you to share. And really getting creative with relaxation is fun. There's so much out there. There's a couple of videos I wanted to share that students love. So one of them is really geared much more towards our younger students, but it's that Sesame Street Common and Kobe Callier, I think that's how you say it, belly breath with Elmo. It's belly breathe, that kind of song. And it just kind of brings up some energy for our younger students. They can kind of have fun with the idea of belly breathing. And then one that I found, and my 5-year-old loves this one too, is Calm Body, Calm Mind. It's a mindfulness song for kids, and it's actually Netflix Junior Jam. So if you look that up, that's a really fun one. It's a way to slow down. And a lot of our students really need that slow down. And then think about apps for our older students. How can we really speak their language? How can we get them to maybe practice through an app? And we can pull up some of the apps and practice. So Calm has some really wonderful videos where it's a bubble and it gets bigger and then smaller. I've seen the triangle videos. There's just a lot out there. These are just some really good apps you can take a look and recommend. And then Stop, Breathe, and Think is a really great one too. There's one that's Bulldog Finds His Happy Place, and it shows how to kind of turn off the noise outside. So it's just the idea of seeing how can I make this come alive and have them practice some of the skills that I'm teaching outside. And that might look different than we did handouts. Teaching emotions. So this is really fun to do. And actually one of my favorite things to do virtually now, playing charades. So a fun way to do this is actually you can chat the student a feeling, and then they can go ahead and act it out and have the group guess that way. There's tons of recorded books on YouTube. So it's a different way. You can read it aloud, but there's also that option of that recorded book. There's tons of pictures and posters to incorporate emojis. Our students love those emojis. And then just using that visual of that feeling thermometer. So being able to explain it and have it come Just like they would have it on the handout, you can have it on the screen. And I didn't say this before, but we don't also want to make the whole thing slides. We want to just use a couple of slides, maybe a few slides, depending on which one it is. We want to make sure we see them and we engage with them, and it's not just sharing a screen. So I think that's important as well. One really great video that I found that's about anxiety is called Fight, Flight, Freeze. It's a guide to anxiety for kids. It's on YouTube. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm always looking for a really good video that explains the concept of what happens to our body. And this is really concise and great for younger students. So this is all kind of for our younger students here. That's what the video looks like. And then what about the feelings in the body? So we know we all have feelings in the body. And a way that we can incorporate things here is actually using the drawing function. So you have to kind of play around with this before, but it's not as challenging as it looks. So there's a drawing function on your computer and there's different colored pens. And so think about headaches, just kind of being able to draw. Heart beating fast, stomach ache, what that might look like. So really engaging them. So, what happens in your body? And if somebody says headache, being able to draw it. You could also have them use their own whiteboard or have them draw a body and fill it in. So there's just lots of different options to incorporate this way. And then one thing that we always talk about with CBT is that idea of the cognitive triangle. So helpful thoughts. So drawing the triangle, the thought bubble, the courage card here. So they might not have access to the courage card. They might not have access to the triangle. So let's get them to draw it. And we know that actually is really good for them. It accesses a different part of their brain. Let's all draw the triangle. Let me show you a picture. What's in the thought bubble? Everybody draw a thought bubble and think of a helpful thought. So this example here is straight from Bounce Back, playing a video game, and there's two people. There's one person who loves the video game and one person who's never played it before. And what's their triangle look like? So it's just a visual of teaching it. Also their courage card. They could just draw their own courage card. We could have them draw it from home if they need to, if they don't have access to one. So just really being flexible in that way, especially with our younger students. We might have to really show them how to spell it, but those are things that we can kind of work around. And what about for our older students? So those of you that are familiar with CBITS, we use the term hot seat thought, so helpful other thought. So I just kind of created a hot seat. And so you can take turns with students in the hot seat and have them think about, so what's in your thought bubble for this example? And we're really, I think it's great to use relevant examples. So things like, I'll never go back to school. So that might be an unhelpful thought. Think about what might be a helpful thought for that. So just trying to talk about what you think affects how you feel and what you do, and thinking about how do we make that info kind of come alive. So we can put in the chat, can everybody share a helpful thought for this example? Might just look different when you're practicing the hot seat, but we can still engage them. And then real life exposure. So we know there's parts in both Bounce Back and CBITS where we really have to practice what's hard for us. So think about, what's a good example? How can I visually show that? There's a really great fillable worksheet that you could pull up from Bounce Back and really fill in the ladder when you're doing an example. But what's wonderful is a ladder is so easy to draw. Everybody draw your ladder? Tell me what's at the top. So in that case, they really just need a pen and a piece of paper, sharing together and creating the ladder and talking about where are you on your feeling thermometer. And then something that could be really fun is creating a coping skills box. So what do you have at home that helps with thought, with distraction? What do you have that can really help when we talk about positive imagery or relaxation, and trying to get people to share just things that they can share with the group and teach them just some coping skills to practice with things at home. So something that smells really good, something that makes them feel good, maybe something soft. So having them at home, they can really access some things and kind of share them with the group if it's helpful. And then one thing that's really come up a whole lot, and we're going to really learn a lot more about this as this year kind of comes along, but many students will be ready to engage in the trauma narrative. We know there are still things happening in the community for our students. We want to consider the COVID-19 stressors and anything additional. And it might be contraindicated for our students. We know there are students that maybe have ongoing trauma. They may have a real lack of privacy that indicates that they can't engage. They may have a lack of parent and family support, which would really make the narrative difficult, especially for our young students, where they're likely need to be a big part of it. So ultimately, we're going to learn more about this in the months to come, but it's a judgment call. So thinking about the trauma narrative that we are doing it. In many of the groups in New Orleans, but there are some good guidelines to think about. So considerations, having the caregiver at home is something that you can call ahead. We have students that, they're at home doing virtual. Their parents are working. They have access to them. They're older students. And so thinking about scheduling it when they're home for sure. Reviewing the screener prior to make sure you're ready and having that counseling worksheet. But it can work really well just, talking about it, maybe sharing the feeling thermometer as you go and gauging how they're doing as they go. And you've kind of built some rapport, so you have a feel for them, as you're going. So we want to explain to the caregiver the importance of the privacy and emotional impact that this can have. So in thinking about bounce back, we might have the caregiver involved. We might have them draw or write on the whiteboard. We want to think about a special spot for them to keep it. We can also have parents that take a picture, and send it to us so we can make a book for them ourselves. So the younger students can really have their caregiver help them create a story, maybe have shorter sessions. And I'm kind of moving through these quickly because we don't have too much longer, but just some strategies for problem solving, thinking about the whiteboard, writing on the slides, using breakout rooms for pros and cons. This is a bounce back group. So pick an action here. So what's a courage thought for if you get a test grade back and you got a bad grade? Show me what you would do to relax, and just kind of incorporating that. This is a fillable worksheet for who's on your team. And then these are just a couple of resources to wrap it up that we've come up with that have been really fun. So this is a virtual Bitmoji room for bounce back. And so I'm not going to go through the scavenger hunt, but you start it and you kind of find the clues. And then at the end, you look for the treasure, and then you find the treasure. And it's really just a video, a fun video. So we usually just use something like that. And this is a fun Jeopardy game for CBITS that you can create. This is a CBITS room I created here. The bounce back room. These are just fun things to think about. How can we make this engaging? We want to make sure we support caregivers and explore what are some new ways we can engage them. Do we have our caregiver meeting through Zoom, or another platform? How can we share resources for them? And then most importantly, and kind of where I want to just stress, is thinking about, the virtual work, thinking about doing this virtual work and how you're also experiencing really heavy things yourself. And, you want to reflect on that, make sure you're in a good space before you start group. You may consider like a calm exercise to settle yourself, thinking about creative ideas to problem solve. And I just have thought through the barriers. So thinking about equity and access, if you can't have supplies, that's okay. We'll work with it, right? If we, just being really flexible and trying to say, like, I really just want to connect with students. How can we, collaborate with other people and share resources? It's just a really great time to do that. These are some really great NCTSN resources that you can look through, and some other ones. So I wanted to make sure I left a little time for some questions. So I kind of went through the last few quickly. Happy to go back if there's any specific questions. And Leora, let me know if there, I know you wanted me to go slow, but I don't want to run out of time for questions. So
no, that was perfect. That was perfect. You just caught me like mid-stretch as you were inviting me to the screen. Okay, so we've got 5 questions. One is more of a technical, so I want to start with the first. But I do want to invite folks, as we're doing some questions, that this is a moment for us to just take a pause. That was a lot of good content and good strategy, and just wanted to invite you in the chat box, panelists and attendees, to offer your own videos, tools, tips that are your go-tos. There was 13% of you that are doing your virtual rooms, so help us out. Help the folks who aren't doing this yet. Help the folks who are thinking about doing this yet. So let's just go first. If we can just do one more backup.
Oh yeah.
One more moment around SSET, CBITS, bounce back.
Okay.
Differences,
sure.
Similarities, developmental implementation. So grades.
Yeah, absolutely. So CBITS is cognitive behavioral intervention for trauma in schools, and it's really meant for 6th graders up to high school. And it's a skill building, wonderful intervention that really teaches CBT skills. It teaches relaxation, problem solving, and there's a trauma narrative component, just like I kind of went through. Bounce Back is the younger version, and it starts with kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade. And we engage students, younger students, and they also do a trauma narrative, but they do their story independently, and we involve the caregiver in that. And then SET is student support. Support for students exposed to trauma. And that is an intervention that's really meant for teachers that in some places that have limited resources with mental health clinicians. So teachers deliver that. And the concepts from CBITS are very, very much involved in that. So teaching relaxation, all those components, it's just meant to be done by somebody who's not a clinician or doesn't want to do, as much clinical. So that is SET.
And, there are many, many folks who on this call, I know from knowing them and knowing what folks put in the intro, who have more of a leadership role at districts or counties, or who are student supports. And so I'm wondering, in thinking about Bounce Back, SET, CBITS, what are some of your advice points if you are interested in approaching and adopting and implementing one of those evidence-based practices for students who need tier 2 supports in this virtual time? Like, what do we need to consider as leaders?
Yeah, I think just, we know that this is a need out there, and, there's a lot of virtual training, there's a lot of virtual implementation guidance now. And so we know that mental health needs are just getting bigger. And so it's a way to, you can check out these websites, cbitsprogram.org, bouncebackprogram.org. They're all here. Trauma Aware Schools has some really great resources on there as well. And, just know that it's really a skill building intervention. And, there are a lot of students that would really benefit depending on anything they've been through. So we have students that have had loss. Traumatic grief is often a part of it. We have students that may have traumas, such as being in a car accident. It could be a variety of things, sometimes medical treatment, but we know there's a lot of loss due to COVID. And so we could actually make groups more homogenous around that even. And we can combine grade levels if they're close. Now that's been a little bit harder in person, but virtually it's not a challenge. So thinking about what are my students going through, if I'm using a universal screener, I can really find those students that need this and create these small pockets of support with younger students and older students. And one of the things, and I'll just go back to kind of share my Bitmoji room, but thinking about what a great way to share this with your students and have them practice skills. So when you click on these, they bring you to the app, and so it's just a different way to connect and have them practice their skills. So practicing relaxation by clicking on it, trying to remember that way. So, just bringing about some innovation into the old tried and true group therapy. And so I think this has been a really great experience. And I think it just offers, to think about these resources, it just offers another way to deliver these really well-researched interventions to the community in a different way and through schools.
Yeah. The piece that I'm hearing from you, Beth, also is a reminder that the way that we tier student services is flexible and adaptable to the need. Meaning, if we know, so I'm just going to speak personally, there were 44 deaths alone today in Los Angeles County, right? Our county is having a surge. So if we know that it is very likely that this experience of loss might be universal, it's interesting because then it actually invites us to rethink it as a tier 1, that everyone is invited to groups. And then there actually might even be able to be a tier 2 for types of loss that might be more acute or more traumatic. So it's just a way for us as a community right now to remember that the pyramid is not, the pyramid is just a framework for us to move experiences dynamically when experiences are held for more, and then some, and then a few. Does that resonate?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we've been talking about in the mental health community here. We have so many students now that really, they need this. And then, thinking about us, as professionals and just being a part of this. So absolutely. It all looks different now with the tiers.
So let's talk about, Jennifer's got a question around a template. So do you have a template? Is there a template that you have a go-to for informed consent for bounce back and SET groups? Or is there a way that we can get that to folks?
Sure. You can email me. I'll go back. I do have one that we use. That's just a sample, but it includes those types, the things that I listed. And so I can, I can share. I really probably need to put it on like the discussion board, but is there a specific one, CBITS or bounce back? Because I'm
going to ask Jennifer. Maybe Jennifer, in the chat box, you can write which templates would be.
Yeah, and you can email me, Jennifer. Feel free to.
Great. Yeah. Okay, then we've got a couple questions that are interested in accessing your Google Classroom, so your Bitmoji live slide. So we will be posting your PDF, but would you be open to us sending out the live slide in a follow-up?
Absolutely.
Okay. Great.
So yeah, and occasionally the links change. So just to put my disclaimer on that, there's sometimes I go back and they don't work, but all the books and things like that should be able to click on and they play, which is just so amazing. So it's been really fun to create. And now we're just trying to even create it for more interventions. And I have a lot of help from our interns at Project Fleur de Lis. We had one particularly help me with the scavenger hunt, which has been really fun to do. So we're just trying to make some of the go ahead.
Sorry, I want to connect those of you who I want to bridge curriculum and instruction and student support services. So as a former project-based learning coach, my recommendation also is why don't you, let's actually make this a a activity for young people to create for themselves, so that they're setting up their own Google Classroom, they're sourcing out, they've got to make decisions about what's a culturally responsive evidence-based practice, what fits for them. There's actually a way for us, instead of creating for students, to actually partner with young people for them to make meaning of resources that meet their needs, and then co-construct their own resource together, right? That's like,
love that
yeah.
so much.
Yeah. And you can even do it, of course, many of you work in districts across the span. So what if that is like an 11th grade assignment, and their client is a 4th grade student, and so they have to interview their 4th grade student? Do you see where so there's like ways to creatively set up the work so that young people are actually actively engaged in their own resourcing.
Yeah, and this is their world that they live in. They have so much to teach us. I can't even tell you. I shared at first my bounce back room with my 5-year-old, and he clicked around. And I was just trying to see, can he do this if I sent this home for homework? And no problem, right? It's, it's just a different time. So there, a lot of times they know more than us. So
yeah. Yep. Okay, a couple more questions, Beth. So we've got one question on from Allison. I might need help, Allison, in the chat box, help with your question. So there's, do you have lessons that are already on a platform, resources that are ready online that folks could use in implementation?
So we are working on that. And so I know that the fillable bounce back forms are going to be available. And there are many people across the country that are trying to create these things. And so we're kind of working on that. And so bear with us with some of that. So a lot of the stuff I've created, I'm happy to share. But I know we don't have anything packaged and ready to share yet. It's really just trying to go with the lessons and just have them come alive and get creative with it.
Yep. All right. So the answer is stay tuned, or let's all create it together, right?
Yes.
For one another. Okay. 2 more.
Sure.
Yvonne, is there a digital format for virtual sessions out there, or should we create our own?
So I have been creating my own. And so I guess that's kind of the same thing, as just a lot of the content just trying to bring alive. But I just want to make sure that I do stress that we really don't want to miss out on the connection with our students. And so we don't want to overly digitalize all of it. I think about what resources, we can incorporate to have it come alive or have them practice. But we really don't want to miss on that group interaction, that engagement together with our faces. So just want to share that.
That's right. Thank you for saying that. I always, it's like the same here, that good facilitation and good teaching happens, and then you learn the technology to bring it alive. So if a therapeutic alliance isn't in place before the technology happens, the technology is not necessarily going to make it stronger, right? We got to work on the skill and the relationship and use the platform to actuate the connection. All right, one last question. What kind of consolidation projects have bounce back group members created?
So, we're talking younger students. I think it's going to be things like everybody, come up with a different relaxation that was your favorite, and we're going to share it in our consolidation project, or something that you learned here that you want to share. They can make their own drawings or, videos. You're going to have some savvy kids that are ready to do like their belly breath and make it really exciting. So I would encourage our students to get creative. Teach me something I taught you. Show me that you enjoyed it and learned it, and show me what your favorite part was. I one time had them doing like painting pictures. So I don't know if, whatever they have access to, they could act it out. But and then really engaging with each one and saying, what's your plan for when we share it? What's your plan? And so trying to just make that material come alive.
Okay. One last question from Josiah. The CNMI team is super engaged, which is amazing. So on the goal slide where you had the emojis, how does it work to have multiple group members answering?
So I really engage in like a virtual circle type of situation. So I'll say we're going to do this goal worksheet, and so I want everybody to give a chance. And so I would actually kind of bring it up and then engage each person to share. And so that's usually what I do. I like when everyone can share. They can always pass. That's always an option. And what, one thing I didn't mention either is don't be afraid to be direct. It's just it's different engagement. So I might say, I can't really see your face. I only see half of it. I really miss seeing your face. Can you show me that? Or, just being able to engage with kids and telling them, oh, I can't really hear you. And the other day I said, it's really kind of loud. Is there a place you can go? And so one of the students moved, and I talked about the bird. The bird is part of our group, so just trying to engage our students in, whatever challenges we have, and just, being able to meet them where they are is really important.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Beth, thank you so much. So many tangible takeaways. We saw many folks in the chat box just saying thank you for all the examples. We're so grateful for the time, and it's also really lovely to have a practitioner come and present your learnings. I think like that's the biggest bold, which is that these are some of your learnings, and we're going to continue to learn together.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I just want to say thank you for inviting me to the party. It's been fun. Thanks.
Yeah, well, you're in Louisiana, but you can be a West Coaster if you'd like to be a West Coaster.
Love it. I need the weather.
All right, Beth, I'm going to invite you to mute yourself and go off camera, and then we're going to do some closeout. So, hi, everyone. What a whole session. And it's December 3rd, and we're all still here. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us. So let's look ahead at what's coming up next. So again, I'm going to continue to welcome and invite you to join the sessions as a team and then debrief after the session. So what resonated, what needed more inquiry, how might we provide more technical assistance to you to support your learning moving forward. And I've put the Treatment and Services Adaptation Center, TSA, that Beth was referencing earlier, the links there, and as well as the guide. I know that we all need more guides in our life, but this is a really good guide. So I recommend it. And I also wanted to name this came up last session. And so actually I'm watching the Q&A right now too. So if you are a novice to the world of the technicals and the virtuals, I wanted to offer that back in March, April, our team quickly put this together. It's a virtual learning guide. We've got guidance for circle facilitation, technology tips, content creation guides, trauma-informed and culturally competent virtual learning. So definitely check that out. I'm going to ask Livia to link that in the chat box, and it's also on the PDF at the bottom of the slide. So if you don't get it, thank you, Livia. If you don't have it, you'll be able to get it. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to have a little bit of a pause between now and January, which also means that if you are in the Northwest or the Pacific Southwest, and you'd like to have a facilitated conversation with your team about your learnings thus far, please let your MHTTC know. That's me or Kelsey, Megan, Livia. We're here for you. Come back in January for our module on ISF and equity, and then definitely come back for a town hall because we want to hear what have been all your learnings thus far. All right. Many of you know we're in the middle of a trauma-informed suicide prevention school district, county, and state systems leadership series led by our colleague Angela Castellanos and team. We just had the first session this Monday, but we've got another session this last Tuesday. But we have another session coming up Monday and then the Monday after. So please join us for that. And of course, the second Wednesday of every month, Oriana Iles leads us in Mental Health Wellness Wednesday. This is open to any of you, even if you're not in our region. So those are two upcoming events that are present, and we will definitely follow up with more soon. And then last but not least, there's a couple resources. You may know this already. You may have this saved in your tabs. but the whole MHTTC network has a COVID-19 grief, loss, and bereavement hub. So and that's general, it's not just for school mental health, but general mental health, any events or resources that are going on to support us to become more grief sensitive and attuned in our workforce development, that's up there. And then of course we have a COVID-19 school mental health resources hub too, nationwide. So those are two national resource hubs from all of us at the MHTTC network for your own learning. And as if you want to get any of our webinars whatsoever, this is you can get the link of all of our webinars, and you can always, of course, just email us, either one of our centers, and we'll get you what you need. All right. Yes. Great. So Whitney, if we can actually get, Livia, if you can make sure to answer in the chat box, if you can put the link of where every single webinar from this series has been recorded, that would be really helpful. I know myself when I'm watching webinars, I'm like learning, I'm listening once, and then I need to listen again and one more time for the learning to really integrate. So this is our contact information. If you need anything, let us know. And of course, the Northwest contact information. Thank you, Livia. So Whitney, just right below all the bit.ly, that's the link for all of the recordings. Give us about a week and we'll have this one up. Give us a little bit of time. And I am going to invite you in the chat box to take a luscious minute, 2 minutes, to put in the chat box to panelists and attendees one takeaway that you're walking away with. It could be a tool, it could be an idea, it could be a resource. Someone just offered us vocabulary, which is a great word. I'm going to try and use it as much as possible. I'm going to wait till I see a couple and then we can get going. Okay, ideas for strategies on engaging students. Bitmojis, Bitmoji Classroom. We need a bird when we roll out our evidence-based sessions. Thank you. Yes, you always need something to happen to elevate some humor in the room. Yes. Being patient with myself. So someone just wrote, I'm taking away to be patient with myself. Yes. Yes. That's a good reminder for all of us. Thank you. Learn about the clickable classrooms. Yep, so that's the Google Classroom, the Google Classroom slide, and actually the hot seat. Excellent. So Josiah, I was about to say, I'm about to go to my own session. There's an amazing series happening in a couple minutes by Prentice Hemphill and Adrienne Marie Brown on survivor healing, and they created a healing space for all participants, for us as adults, with a Google Classroom. So great reflection. Okay, start slow and small. Slow and small, incorporating strategies into the larger outcomes we desire for students. Bounce back fillable worksheet now available. Brain breaks. We could even say brain and body breaks. Include students in honoring diversity and needs. Bulldog finding his happy place. Calm. Let's do a couple more. Okay. On behalf of the Northwest and Pacific Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, we are so grateful that you continue to join us or that you just joined us today. A big thank you to Beth, a huge thank you to Livia for supporting technology. I want to wish you the next 5 minutes to be full of happiness, filling out our evaluation and letting us know how we can support your continued learning. And most importantly, and most fundamentally, we want you to know that you are doing your best in a really hard time. So thank you for being open to stretching yourself, becoming neuroplastic in your skill sets, being compassionate, starting slow and steady, and know that we are here to support you. You're not alone in this whole complicated, wild world. And then the most importantly is that we hope that you and your loved ones stay healthy and stay held. We will see you in January. Thank you. Have a good evening, night, or day, wherever you are.